Section 2 of Ancient Civilizations of Mexico and Central America by Herbert J. Spinden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Mario Pineda. Introduction, Part 2. The brave defense of Cuauhtémoc availed for naught against cannon and steel armor. On the 13th of August, 1521, the conquest of Tenochtitlan was achieved and the spirit of a warlike people forever broken. The Valley of Mexico having been taken, numerous expeditions were sent out to subdue the more distant provinces and to establish colonies. Alvarado invaded the south, and by 1524 he had captured Utatlan and other native strongholds on the highlands of Guatemala and had invaded Salvador. Cortés himself undertook a wonderful march from Vera Cruz to the Gulf of Honduras to punish an unruly subordinate. His course lay through the swamps and jungles of the Usumacinta Basin, thence across the savannas of southern Yucatan to Lake Petén, and finally over the mountains to Lake Izabal and the Motagua River. Even today, much of his route would be called impassable for an army. Puerto Cortés, on the northern coast of Honduras, was founded at the conclusion of this expedition. The exploitation of Yucatan and Tabasco was granted to Francisco Montejo, who began the conquest of this low-lying territory in 1527. The first campaigns were disastrous and heartbreaking. Several short-lived Salamancas were founded, one of them at Chichen Itza. But the odds were too great, and by 1535 all the Spaniards had been killed or expelled. The son of Montejo renewed the struggle. In 1540, Campeche was founded, and early in 1542, the city of Mérida was established upon the site of an earlier Mayan town. Progress was also rapid in the north. Nuño de Guzman departed in 1529 on a mission to conquer Michoacán and the great northern province known as New Galicia. His rule was marred by many acts of cruelty. In 1538, Coronado, the successor of Guzman, led his army northward to the land of the Pueblo Indians and then out into the Great Plains. Before the first English settlement was made in North America, the power of Spain was firmly established not only throughout Central America and Mexico, but also in the southwestern part of the United States. The spiritual conquest was no less remarkable than the territorial. The priests accompanied and even preceded the armies with the doctrine of the cross. The rough and ready characters that enlivened the wonderful drama of this period had the vices of greed and cruelty, but nearly all were imbued with the pride of religion, if not with the true flame. The firmness and bigotry on the one hand, and the open sympathy on the other, with which the Catholic fathers met the practical problems before them, resulted in vast achievements. Either by accident or design, certain patron saints and efficacious shrines of special interest to the natives were not long in becoming known. The Virgin of Guadalupe and the Black Christ of Esquipulas brought many converts to the foreign faith. Church building was carried on apace. The various religious orders became rich and powerful and exerted a strong influence upon civil administration. The later history of this great region can be passed over briefly. Cortés was the first Governor-General of Mexico, but he was soon shorn of his power as dictator at large. The first audiencia was appointed in 1528 and is noteworthy simply by reason of its misrule. The second audiencia, beginning 2 years later, put through some excellent reform laws. The first viceroy, the great and good Mendoza, arrived in 1535, and for 15 years the land prospered under his rule, which was benign without being weak. He was succeeded by Luis de Velasco, who emancipated many of the enslaved Indians. The long line of viceroys continued until 1821, when Spain was forced to relinquish her provinces in America. Among the greatest of the viceroys was Bucareli, the 46th in line, who ruled Mexico from 1771-1779, while the United States of America were just beginning to feel the pulse of life. During the viceregal period in Mexico, the region to the south was ruled by the Captain General of Guatemala. The dominion was subdivided into 5 departments corresponding to the modern republics of Guatemala, which then included the Mexican state of Chiapas, Honduras, Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. Panama was ruled from the South American province of New Granada. Weakened by Napoleonic wars and rent by internal dissensions, Spain found herself in the first 2 decades of the 19th century unable to maintain her waning power in America. Bolivar and his brother patriots raised the standard of revolt in South America in 1810, and in the same year war for independence broke out in the north. Hidalgo, the parish priest of Dolores, rang the Liberty Bell of Mexican freedom on the 16th of September 1810. This beloved patriot was captured the year following and shot, but the revolution, once begun, was continued under Morelos and other leaders. After 1815 the cause seemed hopeless, but in 1820 there was a new uprising and General Iturbide, who was sent to put it down, turned his army against the government and established himself as emperor. Central America was also included in this Mexican empire. The rule of Iturbide soon became unpopular, and in 1823 he abdicated his throne. The Mexican Republic that was then instituted continued until the French intervention in 1861. During this time, the most noteworthy events were the war with the United States in 1846-47 and the passing of the reform laws under Benito Juárez that freed Mexico from the oppressions of the Church. As a result of the French intervention, Maximilian of Austria was made emperor. This unfortunate ruler, who did much to beautify Mexico City, was dethroned and shot in 1867. The republic was then re-established. The other republics of Central America formed a federal union at the time the First Mexican Empire came to an end in 1823. This union was preserved till 1839, and several later attempts were made to restore it. The 5 republics have had such tempestuous careers as a result of warfare, usurpation, and political brigandage that their material and social development has been stunted. Several are now, however, on the high road to stability. Panama was until 1903 a part of Colombia. British Honduras had its origin in the concessions given to English logwood gatherers and to the fact that pirates found refuge behind the coral reefs that line the shores. The English claim to the Mosquito Coast rested upon a similar flimsy basis and was finally abandoned. Languages. The 20 distinct stocks of related languages formerly recognized in Mexico and Central America have now been greatly reduced. Of those that remain, some occupied small areas and had little in the way of dialectic variation, while others stretched over wide territories and were divided into many mutually unintelligible tongues, which in turn were subdivided into well-defined dialects. Several stocks are now approaching extinction through the substitution of Spanish. A number of languages, however, are still spoken by hundreds of thousands of natives. The language having the greatest geographical extension within the area under consideration is the Mexican or Nahuan, now consolidated with the Piman, Shoshonean, etc., in a great stock called the Euro-Aztecan. In its extent, this stock may be compared to the Indo-Iranian of the Old World, which comprises most of the modern and ancient languages of Europe, as well as those of a large part of Asia. Within the United States are the numerous Shoshonean tribes, found as far north as Idaho, reaching into California on the one hand and into Texas on the other. In southern Arizona and northwestern Mexico come the Piman group. East of the Sierra Madre are the Tarahumare and the Tepehuan. These languages are mutually unintelligible, although morphologically related, and all are subdivided into dialects. The relationship is proved through laborious comparison and analysis of the words and grammar in the same way as the philologist proves that Persian, Greek, Russian, English, and Welsh are all cognate tongues. Farther to the south are still other divisions of the stock, including the Huichol and Cora of the mountainous region north of Guadalajara and the Mexican or Aztecan of the Valley of Mexico and adjacent country. The Mexican language is still spoken by 1 million or more natives and is divided into a number of dialects. Properly, the Aztecs are a single tribe whose chief city was Tenochtitlan, the ancient Mexican city. They first appear on the page of history as the Mexitin, along with the closely related Chalca, Xochimilca, etc. The people of central Mexico called their language Nahuatl, meaning clear speech, and nicknamed their relatives to the south Pipil, or boys, because they spoke awkwardly. Mexican colonies were widespread before the coming of the Spaniards, and during the conquest the distribution of this nation was made still greater. The Mexicans, and especially the natives of Tlaxcala, accompanied the Spaniards on military expeditions against other tribes, and as a consequence many place names in southern Mexico and Guatemala were translated into their language. There were, however, large groups of Indians of Mexican stock already located in southern Guatemala and in Salvador, still farther south were the Niquirao of Nicaragua, and a little-known group called the Sigua in Costa Rica. The wide geographical distribution of Euro-Aztecan languages has an undeniable historical significance. The numerous tribes represent a very wide range in culture, albeit nearly all are dwellers of arid or semi-arid regions. Some, like the Paiute, are miserable diggers, willing to eat anything that will support life. Others, like the Comanche, are warlike raiders. More progressive tribes like the Hopi have adopted agriculture and developed interesting arts and customs, while the highest members of the group are among the most civilized nations in the New World. It seems clear that language can be used as a basis of classification over a much greater stretch of time than can other social habits summed up as culture. Particular phases of art, religion, and government develop and disappear, but the grouping of sounds used to express ideas remains as proof that peoples now far apart geographically, as well as in their habits and achievements, were once close together. The peculiar distribution of the Euro-Aztecan languages may indicate a general southward movement of the stock. The second most important linguistic stock is the Mayan, now spoken by over 500,000 people. This stock has only one outlying member, namely the Huasteca of northern Veracruz. The other 21 languages cover a continuous area in the Mexican states of Yucatan, Tabasco, and Chiapas, and in the Republic of Guatemala. The most important language of the group is the Maya proper, which is spoken by the natives of Yucatan and by the Lacandone Indians of the Usumacinta Valley. The Tzeltal, Quiche, Kaqchikel, Chol, and Chortí are other prominent languages. In the region of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec are the Zapotecan and Mixtecan stocks, which differ widely in sound and structure from the Mayan and Nahuatl tongues that hem them in. West and east of the Valley of Mexico are, respectively, the Tarascan and Totonacan stocks, which show no great amount of subdivision. In Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica are several language groups that have never been carefully studied. It seems likely that some of these will be consolidated when words and grammatical structures are better known. The Chiapanecan languages were spoken in 3 localities on the Pacific side of Nicaragua and Costa Rica, while a 4th division occupied a small area far to the northwest on the banks of the Chiapas River. It is now believed that the Otomi group, as well as a number of minor languages, including the Mazatecan, belong in a single stock with the Chiapanecan. If this supposed connection should prove true, a modern movement of the stock would be pretty surely indicated. Several members of the Subtiaban stock show the same south to north movement, and here there is evidence that the migration took place some 3 centuries before the coming of the Spaniards. Parts of the Isthmian region were held by tribes having linguistic affiliation with South America, and it is not unlikely that a considerable backflow from South America made itself felt along the Atlantic coast of Central America, if we may judge by ethnological features and by suggested linguistic connections. The Great Hokan stock has now been extended from California across northern Mexico to Texas, taking in the Seri and numerous other tribes of low culture. For the most part, these tribes are extinct or at least have lost the ancient speech. Ethnology. To a less extent than the native languages of old time, customs still hold out against the tide of European influence. In regions not easily accessible on account of deserts, mountains, or tropical jungles, there are a number of Indian tribes that preserve in a large measure their ancient arts and ideas. But the study of these remnant peoples has not been very thorough. The Pima, Seri, Tarahumare, Tepehuan, and other tribes of the extreme north and northwest of Mexico have until recent times been comparatively unmodified by Spanish influences. Basketry, textiles, and pottery have been maintained by them as well as many religious ceremonies. Farther south among the Cora and Huichol there are also surviving arts. The woven fabrics of these Indians are very beautiful, but introduced ideas are frequently seen. For instance, a very common motif in Huichol textile art is the two-headed Austrian eagle, evidently taken from the coins of Charles V. Crowns similar to those worn by the two-headed eagle are often shown on the heads of rampant animals, but most of the motifs are doubtless of native origin. Among the Huichol and Tarahumare, the curious peyote or hikul worship may be studied. A small variety of cactus is eaten, which induces ecstasy or stupor, accompanied by color visions and peculiar dreams. Elaborate ceremonies are associated with the eating and gathering of this plant. The religious cult of the peyote has swept over a large portion of the Great Plains area of the United States and is known even to Indians in the neighborhood of the Great Lakes. There can be no doubt that the narcotic action of the peyote was known to the Aztecs, who made a ceremonial use of it under the name Teonanacatl. An intoxicating drink called teswin is commonly made in northern Mexico from the heart of the mezcal plant. It takes the place of the famous pulque, the ancient beverage of the Mexican highlands. Hunting dances, in which are employed regalia and ceremonial objects of great interest, occur among the Huichol and neighboring tribes. The so-called God's eyes, made of yarn-strung spider web fashioned over cross sticks, are practically identical with the squash blossoms of the Pueblo Indians. There are also real temple structures or god houses, which are very significant when we consider the former importance of the temple among the more highly civilized peoples to the south. In these and other respects, the Huichol culture is about midway between the culture of the southwestern Pueblo tribes and that which formerly existed in central Mexico. Elsewhere in northern and central Mexico, it is possible to find many suggestions of ancient Indian ways of living. In nearly all the outlying villages, the old-time thatched huts are still used, while baskets, gourd vessels, wooden bowls, earthen pots, and other household objects hark back to native origins, although often modified by European contact. For instance, glazing is commonly seen on the modern pottery. Many travelers in Mexico bring away as souvenirs pieces of pottery from Guadalajara and Cuernavaca. These wares are made by Indians, but in decoration they have only slight traces of the ancient art of the Mexicans. In dress there are noteworthy survivals. The serape, made either of the narrow hand loom or on a crude form of the Spanish thread loom, is a picturesque element in the national dress that is rapidly disappearing from view. Time was when the rich plantation owner wore a gaily colored blanket on fiesta days. The most famous centers for the manufacture and sale of blankets were the cities of Saltillo and San Miguel. The Saltillo pattern shows a medallion consisting of concentric diamonds in various colors upon an all-over design in stripes. The motifs are minute geometric figures skillfully interlocked. The colors are rich and permanent, and are combined in a very pleasing manner. Saltillo blankets must be classed among the finest textile products of the world. The best period was before 1850. San Miguel blankets show characteristically a rosette instead of a diamond in the center. Many beautiful blankets come from other localities in Mexico. The Chimayo blankets have the same part Indian, part Spanish origin and are made by the Spanish-speaking natives in the mountain valleys of New Mexico. In southern Mexico, there are many towns of Indians where the women still wear the finely embroidered huipili. This old-time garment varies considerably in different towns, but as a rule it is a simple sack-like gown cut square at the neck and with short sleeves. Sometimes it is shortened to a blouse and is worn with a skirt. At other times a short huipili is worn over a longer one. An easily visited town where the natives still wear the old-time dress is Amatlan, within an hour's walk of Córdoba. The women of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec have a gorgeous costume, of which the most remarkable feature is a wide ruff worn around the neck or on the back of the head. The Mayan women of Yucatan wear white huipili with needlework in color around the bottom. On the highlands of Guatemala, the huipili is usually a blouse. The skirt sometimes consists of a strip of cloth wrapped several times around the body. An interesting ceremony which survives in some parts of Mexico and Guatemala has as its principal feature a lofty pole with a swivel arrangement at the top to which long ropes are attached. These ropes are wound round the swivel and performers, who may be dressed like birds, attach themselves to the rope ends. During the process of unwinding, the performers whirl dizzily around the pole, descending lower and lower, and swing in a wider and wider circle till they reach the ground. The Lacandone Indians live in the marshy jungles that border the winding Usumacinta. They speak the same tongue as the Maya Indians of Yucatan, but in the matter of culture they have acquired little from the Spaniards. They still weave simple garments and make pottery vessels. In hunting they use the bow and arrow, the latter usually tipped with a point of stone. In their religious practices they use incense burners, which are comparable to those of the 16th century. The Caribs occupy the greater part of the north coast of Guatemala and Honduras, running east from the port of Livingston on the Gulf of Amatique. These people, originally of South America and later of the West Indies as well, were deported by the English from the island of St. Vincent in 1796. They have now established themselves in the new land, where they raise the manioc or cassava root and press out the poisonous juice in a basketry tube, as do their kindred in the Orinoco Valley. Long before the forcible immigration, it is likely that the Caribs, who were cannibalistic in habit, had raided the shores of Central America in their sea-going canoes. A significant passage in the Chronicles of the Mayas states that naked man-eating savages visited Yucatan long before the coming of the Spaniards. The Mosquito Indians of the east coast of Nicaragua and Honduras have a very considerable Negro admixture. They are fishermen of low culture. Farther inland are found the Sumo, who flatten the heads of their children and who hold strange feasts in honor of the dead, in which the dancers are masked so that none may be recognized. A string is stretched over the tree-tops from the grave to the feasting place, and over this string the ghost of the dead person is supposed to walk. When everyone has fallen in a drunken stupor from Mishla, the ghost of the dead man departs for the land of the dead. These Sumo Indians build large houses with open sides and are very skillful at fishing with bow and arrow and steering their canoes through wide rapids. They practice polygamous marriages, weave cotton, and make interesting bedwork ornaments. In the narrow Isthmian region, there are tribes of Indians that resist manfully the inroads of civilization. Perhaps the best known of these are the San Blas Indians, who inhabit the mountain fastnesses east of the Canal Sun. In northern Costa Rica, the Huatuso and Talamanca tribes still maintain to a considerable degree their old native character. Physical types. Minor physical differences in stature, head form, and facial expression mark off pretty clearly the tribes of this area from each other. The stature is lowest among the Mayas and Mazateks, the average being about 5 feet 1 inch, while among the Tarascans, Tlaxcalans, and Zapotecs it averages about 5 feet 3 inches. The other tribes of Central America and of central Mexico fall between these extremes. In northern Mexico, the stature increases considerably, average measurements for the Yaqui being in excess of 5 feet 6 inches. To make up for their lack of height, the southern Indians are sturdy and heavy-muscled, with deep chests. Their hair is usually black and straight, but occasionally wavy. Light beards and mustaches are sometimes worn, especially by the Mayas. The eyes are so dark brown as to appear black to the casual observer. They are set rather wide apart, and while usually horizontal, they seem, in some instances, to have a slight mongoloid tilt. Noses vary greatly, but are often finely aquiline. The cephalic index, obtained by dividing the breadth of the head by its length and multiplying the result by 100, is rather high. The Mayas are strongly round-headed, with an index of 85.0, while their linguistic relatives, the Sendals, have a medium index of 76.8. The other tribes of southern Mexico fall between these extremes. No long-headed peoples are found in this area, although in northern Mexico some tribes approach the long-headed type. End of section 2.